Good morning again. It's 10:25. It's Friday, February 2nd, 2024. We're shifting back to Bill S-213, enacting regulation of wetlands, river corridor development and dam safety. And we're returning in particular to the dam portion of the bill and want to learn more about from some operators of dams, as well as revisit the liability issues associated with dam commission. So to get started, let's invite Mr. Jonathan to join us at the table. I think it's probably been a while since you've been in Senate Natural Resources and 22 years. Oh, count. We've changed nothing since you were.
Of course, before that, I spent hundreds of hours in here each session. Saying, well, wonderful fun.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Scott.
It is around day after all, so you would have repeated somehow.
The question is, did I see my shadow or not?
Yes. You did it. So Mahorny, if you could, introduce yourself and then help us understand what's going on with the one you manage and what you're thinking about and how it relates to your team. That'd be great.
Thanks so much. As I think anyone around the room, and back in the day, I was both deputy secretary and secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources. And so I spent a lot of time in this room during the Dean administration. Mostly good. Mostly good. These days I'm running a municipal utility and village in Morrisville Water and Light. I'm general manager, and the community itself, I'm the village manager, really chartered municipality in the state of Vermont. So that's the reason I'm here to speak in the context to which we're also members of the Public Power Supply Authority, and about half of their members are hydro owners. So we've all obviously been chatting about this. I'm not necessarily speaking for each community of VIPSA, but I've shared my thoughts with VIPSA itself. So I've covered that. It's really want to, in Morrisville, we think about ourselves as only Morrisville, but our electric utility actually serves parts of 6 other communities. So we've covered a range of about 7 communities in total, parts of them. And we run 3 utilities, not just the electric utility, but the water and the wastewater utility as well. Our system has been proudly generating local renewable energy since 1895 in the form of hydroelectric power. And we currently operate 3 separate dam generating stations, Green River Reservoir, Cadiz Falls, and the Morrisville Station. And 2 of them are Run River, and 1 Green River Reservoir currently allows some drawdowns in the future, probably not. They're all permitted, and the Green River Reservoir is also a high hazard dam. So that means that at least for Green River, we also are required to do inspections on a regular basis for FERC under the high hazard dam statute, which is known as Part 12D. We're actually in the process of doing our 9th of those. Happens every 4 or 5 years. A thorough assessment of the dam and how it's operated and what condition it's in. So I wanted to start with just where we would probably all concur with these issues, which is that dams need to be operated safely. You need a real commitment of resources and time, money to make sure that these dams are safe as any dam can be. I'm a professional civil engineer by training, and the first thing I learned about dams was that there's never been a dam built that doesn't leak. What you try to do is manage how they leak and where they discharge so that they don't fall down. So they are inherently risky no matter their size. So what's critical is that anyone who's operating a dam has to consistently have their eyes on the dam in a regular manner and in a structured manner to make sure that their dam is operating correctly. I think with 125 years of dam operation, Morrisville probably demonstrated that we do it as well as anybody, and that we're committed to providing the resources necessary to do it well. So,
How old is Green River, that dam?
Green River Dam was built as a flood control dam in the 1940s and had hydroelectric generation added to it in the 1980s. So it wasn't actually built for hydroelectric generation. It was built as a flood control dam. So our concerns with S 213 really have to do with the very last section, whatever that section is, 1091, I think it was, yes, section 1091 of the bill, where the standard moves from general liability to strict liability. And we have a few concerns around those that I'll characterize for you. The first is where, from my perspective, authority meets liability. As I noted, these are all of our dams and most that generate electricity are both FERC licensed and regulated by state water quality permits, 401 water quality permits, for example. And in each of those cases, we have mandated to us certain ways we can and certain ways we cannot manage those dams. And that creates the potential for us to be strictly liable for a failure where we aren't actually allowed to take an action that we would have otherwise taken. The example I'll give you is, with Green River, and I know it always gets tense when we talk about Green River because it's been going on forever. But the water quality permit that was issued in 2016 actually includes no provision for drawdown in anticipation of a flood. We've been contesting that permit since that time for a host of reasons, so it's not currently in effect. But we actually don't have the authority to draw it down in anticipation of flood. Since our old permit is in place, we did that in before both the July floods and I forget when it was, a month or so ago, when we had the big scare about floods. We did it in anticipation of that too. And honestly, at least as long as I'm in the chair, I would draw it down even if the water quality permit was in place, and I would let ANR find me because I would keep that property in front of it. But I raise it because we don't actually have the authority in all cases to take an action. And the way this is written, your statement, and the two pieces in that section, where one is you operate it well, or you have a high hazard dam. Even if you do everything perfectly, you're still not strictly liable in the way that it's written. So that's one concern that we have.
So if you sort of yield to the 401 like conditions and don't draw down, then you're saying you're forced into operating it in a risky manner.
That's correct. And what people don't know about the Green River Reservoir is people think about that dam as the big concrete structure. There's also an earthen dike structure that is part of that complex. And as you may know, the concrete structure is not the piece that would likely fail unless there's something catastrophic wrong with the structure. Earthen dikes, the second you have a trickle of water over the top of them, they're gone. So, it's quite a challenging issue. And again, I personally would violate I should say that in 7 minutes. On the record, I would, because we have an obligation to our neighbors. And I suspect the state will look the other way and say, thank you for doing that. But it doesn't change the fact that there's this issue of where authority meets liability for us.
Mayor Watson?
Thank you. Why is this not a provision that you are allowed to do?
No, I wasn't, I've been here at Morrisville for 1.5 years, and this is a permit from 2016, so I don't know why. I think it was likely an oversight, if I'm just guessing
Okay.
about the historic record. We have been, since I arrived in Morrisville, been in sort of constant communication about the potential for a settlement to meet every law, federal and state law, rule, regulation, and find some tweaks that make that water quality permit work for everybody. And one of the issues I've raised that I believe ANR has generally agreed with is the need to have something in here around drawdown. So I hope we're actually going to fix this problem.
Okay.
But the point is, you use it as an example, whether it's FERC permit or ANR permits, the potential is there to not have the authority to do what you're supposed to do, and yet we'd be liable on that front. So,
Quick question, so prior to the 2016 permit, were you allowed to draw down?
we had probably overly generous ability to draw down. I believe the permit allowed for as much as 10 feet at certain times of the year, and I think 2 or 3 feet at other times of the year. Honestly, I'm clear that we do not need that. No, I don't believe any dam operator involved probably needs that. I won't speak for others, but you can manage these dams both from a flood and a hydrologic perspective with much less than that. So it's really where we find a place to meet in the middle that meets all the needs. So that's the goal. The second area of concern is just whether or not under any condition we'd be able to get insurance. It's frankly pretty difficult to even get general liability insurance for a dam. As I said at the top, that's the first thing that everyone knows about dams is that they leak. So there are no insurance companies that love giving you insurance for it. There have been times in Morrisville's history where they couldn't even find a general liability policy. We currently do have one. We were able to find one again. But I suspect if I've asked their insurance company this question, I don't have an answer today for you. But I can't fathom that if we told them it was a strict liability policy, that I don't believe we would find one available under any condition. Now, as a municipality, this makes us different than some owners of dams, as any municipality will tell you, if your insurance does not cover the cost of any liability, it falls back to your citizens, the taxpayer. As I noted at the top, we serve about 7 communities, and yet the taxpayers that would be on the hook would only be those in Morrisville, because they're the voting members of the village. So 2,200 people, probably less than half that in terms of homes, would be on the hook for. If Green River ever went, I will tell you it's hundreds of millions of dollars. You'll think about from Morrisville Village all the way through Colchester Village and Pike, right? It's 100-foot wall of water. That's why we are so careful about making sure we do everything right. And inspect this thing all the time and have eyes on it every single day, because it's a high hazard dam. That's what we should be doing. And that's what everybody should be doing with anything, in my view. So I believe we find ourselves in a position where we couldn't get insurance. And from a risk perspective, I think it's highly likely that you find many, including Morrisville, who would probably bring a bond issue to our voters to tear all 3 dams down. Because spending $10 or $15 million to take out 3 hydroelectric dams is a lot less than hundreds of millions of dollars of risk. I'm not sitting here to threaten you and tell you that that's what we would do. But we'd have to have a pretty serious community conversation about that. So worried about that. And I also think for the third area, I just think for certain types of dams, I think that moving to strict liability is just unnecessary. As I've already noted, for high hazard dams, we already get inspected by FERC. FERC requires us to hire national consultants to come and inspect on a regular basis every 4 or 5 years. The state inspects all of our dams on a fairly regular basis, even our non-high hazard dams. FERC was in Morrisville within 10 days of the July floods. Not only to look at our high hazard dam, which didn't have any damage at all during those floods, but to look at our other 2 dams, even though they're not high hazard, because our other 2 dams had fully 4 feet of water over the top of them. Thankfully, they're both concrete dams and not urban dams, so they actually withstood that. But FERC was in town in less than 10 days to look at all their dams, just to give you a sense of, and that was with their own stuff. They immediately were up here. So I think on probably every generation dam between FERC and the state, whether it's high hazard or not, there are eyes on these dams all the time, and there are reports. So it strikes me that moving the bar from general to strict is likely necessary for at least those types of dams. That is something we're thinking about here. So my view as I come to a close here is give you my thought on what I think you might consider as an alternative, but also then perhaps close with an anecdote for you. I think rather than trying to solve whatever the real concerns are, and I remember from my time as secretary, these dams that are mostly delinquent were a problem in January 2003 when I left office, and they're a problem today, right? We've made some progress, the NRC and others, and you have all made a lot of progress in removing some of them and making a difference. It's still a problem today, right? So to me, the way to solve this is by making clear and making decisions about what sort of inspection paradigm and regulatory paradigm all dams in Vermont need to fall under. It wouldn't have an impact on us, but we already are under those types of requirements. But maybe they don't have to be as strict for other dams as they are for hydroelectric dams or high hazard dams. But in our has incredible staff that really know what they're talking about and could easily, I suspect, give you information about the right way to do that. So I'll close really with an anecdote from my time when I was secretary. So my second day as Secretary of Natural Resources, I held a press conference on top of Waterbury Dam. And we were looking at the guy that drew down Waterbury Dam in 2000, which was the least popular thing in the state to do in 2000. And it lasted long after I was out of office. That dam was still drawn down. The impact on the people and businesses of that region of the state was immense. It was immense. I share that not because, we should get accolades or we should be, hit for doing that, but rather how we actually came to understand that there was a problem in that dam. We were a good owner. The state then, and I believe now, is a good dam owner, and we did a lot of inspecting. And at that time, we had noticed that where the leaks were showing themselves was beginning to move, and so we poked a bunch of holes in Waterbury Dam. What we found, which was pure coincidence that we found it, was holes in the dam much, much, much bigger than this room.
Oh, nice.
And that's why we drew it down. Now, as likely as not, because what you do in that case is you drill some holes on the grid pattern. We could have missed those holes as easily as we found them.
Okay.
Had we not found them, that dam would have gone and wiped out the Winooski River from Waterbury to Winooski. That's why we shut it down. Now, under this bill, the taxpayers of the state of Vermont would have been strictly liable. We did everything right, everything you could have imagined you'd want somebody to do, we did. And the taxpayers of Vermont would have been strictly liable. That's really what I think we're talking about.
Yeah.
Here. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for coming today, and you have one of the most unique possible perspectives on this topic, so way to go, Chair Fred, finding someone who, you are like the Venn diagram of all the possible ways that you could be impacted by dam safety, so thank you. And thank you for your almost prophetic ability to prevent what could have been potentially the worst dam disaster in Vermont history. You should get an accolade for that.
It was the staff of the DNR, not me. I just had the press conference.
Okay, well, hey, thanks for getting the reporters out there. I don't really understand earthen dikes. I don't fully, I'm trying to, you brought up a new topic that I did not realize I should be concerned about, so thank you for doing that. But I have two questions for you, which is, I do disagree with you on the fact that the liability should be held by the state. And we have our counselor in here who helped draft the language. But I do think that the liability, if your home gets washed away, I think the state should be liable. And I'm wondering if you could speak to, in the absence of the state being liable, what would happen to those folks? That's my concern.
Sure. I think, so of course I don't know, and the future legislature would be heavily involved in this. Most likely immediately you would have FEMA in the state, because it would certainly surpass any levels of triggers for FEMA. So there would be FEMA dollars around. And yes, at the end of the day, you're gonna have, the state's going to be involved in trying to get people back on their feet in such a disaster, because everything from bridges to homes to businesses are gonna be gone. So the state's going to be involved and taxpayers are going to be involved. The question is at what level, what's the appropriate level? Is it at a maximum 100% strict liability, which may or may not include punitive and other pieces? I'm an engineer, not a lawyer, so you got to talk to lawyers. Let me be clear about that. And the state may choose to do that. One could make an argument that the state is already in that chain for liability because, I'm an engineer, not an attorney, but I'm still a bad person to interpret what the laws mean. But since the rivers are the property of the public and common good, one could argue that dams are there at least with the permission of the actual owner, which is the state through all of their citizens. I don't know if that holds water or not in the court of law, but you could make that argument based on what our laws say. So So I'm not here to argue whether the state of Vermont should be.
Okay,
I'm here simply to say that it's an unreasonable standard. For the reasons I expressed, for dam owners to go to that level. When I think the appropriate level is to make sure we're doing all things, all dam owners are doing all things to make sure that these dangerous structures are taken care of.
okay, so I understand, I can understand your perspective and also as the utility and having ownership of that. Then my second question is, and I don't know if you explicitly said it and I missed it, or if it was just kind of. I could infer it from your testimony, but your dam in Morrisville is regulated by the PUC and A&R.
FERC, the PUC and ANR are all in different ways.
And do you have I am of the opinion at the moment that we should move what is regulated by the PUC completely under A&R, other than the CPG side of things, which would look at, obviously, that's
You're
still
talking
gonna.
about dam inspection.
Exactly, how do you feel about that?
So I don't, Morrisville Water and Light doesn't have an opinion on that, but I will tell you as someone. And perhaps it's because I'm biased, because I knew the people that were in the positions back when I was secretary. The dam safety group in A&R. Then, and I believe now, because we've been dealing with the current group heavily. To make sure that the dam safety study that they're doing, that you all, I think, know about. Related to the state potentially owning that facility someday. We've been dealing a lot with your current team there. Those are the people that really understand dams. Their whole world is related to understanding dams and all things safety about dams. So if you're asking if, you know, I would say everybody that knows something about dams go over in that corner.
Yeah.
And well, I'm sure the agency and I would have come in and said the same thing 20 years ago. To come in here and say, oh, we need more people to do it. And they'd be right, honestly.
Yeah.
So whether or not you can afford to do it, that's an issue for you. Both can be true, right?
But you're not, you wouldn't, yeah, you wouldn't say that you're against. Moving to having, okay, at the very least, it wouldn't, okay, thank you very much, very.
Right. Thanks so much for coming in. Sort of a short segment. We have a vote before we leave for the morning, so thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Are you sending in written testimony?
And if you'd like,
That would be great. That way I can read it carefully a second time.
good. And maybe this time I won't have a song written about me, but Senator McClellan. Last time I was here. You got it.
I don't remember, was it Barnum?
Well, no, it was all fun and jovial.
Oh.
It was a session that we did a really big environmental agenda that where everybody hated me that way. If you have a question.
Oh, I did, that's okay, I'm wondering if your written testimony is gonna include that story about like finding the giant hole.
Yeah, that.
That is very helpful to understand this issue.
Good to see you again.
Thank you so much.
With that, I'd like to invite you to join us.
You've written many songs.
Oh, that's nice.
I called Sheriff John Stone, so. It comes back to you, doesn't it?
Get the recording.
He's in the cap.
Sure, it's on Spotify. Good morning, good to see you again. Thank you.
Good morning.
So you know what we're digging into and just wanted to check in with the department, with the commission. And see what your thoughts are on Article 13.
Sure. So good morning, for the record, Elizabeth Schilling, I'm Deputy General Counsel and Hearing Officer with the Vermont Public Utility Commission. I'm with me this morning with Micah Howe, it's also a staff attorney and hearing officer and works of the Commission Dandy. Okay, so this morning I'm here to speak to S 213. The Vermont Public Utility Commission supports draft 1.1 of S 213, which is currently posted to the committee's webpage. And incorporates H 615. That's a bill that would transfer the commission's jurisdiction over dam safety at the 22 hydroelectric dams and related facilities that we currently regulate to the Vermont Agency of Natural Resources. These dams are not currently regulated by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And all the proposed changes are to 10 VSA Chapter 43. So another important point, the commission would maintain its jurisdiction over modifications to the electric generation facilities at these hydroelectric dams under 30 VSA section 248, unless FERC were to assume jurisdiction over these facilities. So this transfer of jurisdiction is consistent with the Model State Dam Safety Program Manual, which was published in September 2022, which ANR staff helped prepare. The manual recommends that authority over dam safety be housed in a single state agency to ensure consistent oversight. The manual states that the Model State Dam Safety Program recognizes that the foundation of any state dam safety program is the legislative authority and accompanying administrative regulations. Adopting the laws and regulations is essential. State statutes should provide authority for dam safety with a single agency to provide consistent oversight. The transfer of jurisdiction will provide both consistent oversight by making ANR the sole state agency responsible for dam safety, to avoid potential discrepancies between the commission's and ANR's dam safety rules and the application of those rules, and it would avoid duplicative rulemaking. With that, I would support draft 1.1. I don't know that your legislative council walked you through that yet. Okay, they have great. So with that, I'm available to take questions.
So,
You're right.
Mr. Chair, in layman's terms, you're okay with ANR taking over the authority?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. But the CPG
For the
process.
safety piece.
Yeah, it's the authority under 10 VSA chapter 43. But we would still maintain jurisdiction under 50 VSA section 248 for any, changes, upgrades to the hydroelectric, electric generating facilities. So the part making power. Beautiful.
Thank you. I think this question is actually for council, because the first iteration that we saw, I remember the comment that the provisions around transferring the jurisdiction to ANR was not, it didn't do the whole job, and that's, I think it was H 615, which is that Senator or Representative Mahali's bill?
You are correct, Senator Watson. The version that's online that Elizabeth is referring to is not what I walked you through.
Right.
It does have provisions that you have not seen.
Okay. And okay, so I just wanted to confirm that because I just hadn't
Yeah.
Sure, and
done tonight, so
draft 1.1
doesn't.
is a clean transfer of jurisdiction as of July 1st of 2024. H 615 does have, I think, more of a graduated transfer. And the timing is a little bit more of a policy decision. We're supportive of the transfer, however.
On either schedule. On either schedule, whether there's a transition or it's.
Correct, either the direct transfer in 2024 or the facility. Iterative transfer under H 615.
And thought I had a follow-up question, maybe I don't, so we're feeling good about like the one draft. Does it more wholly and clean?
Yeah, draft 1.1 appears to be
It does
wholesale transfer July 1st of 2024, no iterative transfer.
Great, thank you.
Right, so we'll have to, we're going that route, here's from. Home dam owners who are affected and other parties to. Which mode, I'm not, so in general, I'd say, I haven't heard any opposition to
Okay.
transfer, the question is. How soon, and what are the conditions for making the transfer?
That's a great one.
Great, any other questions for Michelle?
And I'm happy to, I'll stick around while they're testifying the date's question. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Timely.
Moving right along, Ms. Daly?
Yes. And she yeah.
So you've heard the sort of the back and forth on the liability piece, having a transfer, I don't know. If there's other provisions you want to comment on.
Yeah, thank you. For the record, I'm Sabrina Daly, restoration ecologist with the NRC. Happy Friday. So yeah, I'm back today to respond to the wetlands portion of S 213 at this point in time. And after further review, it does seem that there are specific portions of the bill
that we think the recommendations from A&R make sense, and so I just wanted to share those recommendations.
And so before we go into wetlands, just let me double check to see if you or Mr. Carpenter are here to speak to dams while we have people in the room for dam.
I'm here to speak to things.
Okay, so can we switch it up?
Yeah, totally.
People need one flat.
That's a ton.
I know, but you're so good, it's getting me in and out. We've already had a lot of.
Happy to move it in now.
Exactly.
Well, since we also have council
Yeah.
here, so I looked at the dams, I didn't realize who's doing which piece, Mr. Carpenter.
Lots of paper, Mr. Chair, just making sure so I have everything here. Let's see, oh, for the record, Jared Carpenter, representing the Champlain Committee. Maybe answering questions is best. I could at some point walk folks through I think you have a copy of this now. It says proposed changes to draft 1.1, which Camille's gonna talk. As to the wetlands part, I can walk through the proposed changes to the dams safety section. Like in wetlands, we incorporated some of the A&R proposals, their proposed language with language that we're proposing, but maybe the best thing to do is to start with some of the issues that have already been discussed. As to the jurisdictional transfer, obviously I've come in and I testified in support of moving the dams over from PUC to A&R. In terms of the timing, so the former draft had everything being transferred over essentially, I think my reading was by the effective date of July 1st, 2024, which it was just alluded to. The agency was in wanting the transfer to happen in 2028 after some other things had taken care of. One was the phase 2 rulemaking is going to be done July 1st of 2025, and I think there's a few other moving pieces. Our proposal more follows H615 and sort of splits the difference. The thought was to move by July 1st of 2025, move 4 high hazard dams over to A&R, and then by 2028, the remaining, the significant low hazard dams. The advocates would prefer that happens more quickly, but it seems that was sort of, let's move the high hazard ones over promptly, and then the other ones be moved in maybe even more of a phased approach. The language specifically says that A&R has to come up with a scheduled proposal by July, I think January 1st of 2025, a schedule to move them over, but they have to be done by date certain. So that could be even more of a phasing of the significant hazards are moved over by 26, just throwing numbers out there, and the low hazards can be moved over by 28. One of the things that the agency wanted to happen before they took possession is they wanted to petition to FERC whether or not some of these dams should actually be under FERC jurisdiction and not just solely A&R or what was the PUC. Some of them I think should be, like Marshfield. The problem is, my understanding is the FERC process can take anywhere between 2 and 8 years. So we don't need the dams to be sitting in limbo potentially while we're waiting for the federal agency to decide what to do. The preference of the advocates would be that they are moved over to A&R. And A&R can file the paperwork to FERC. I think the A&R's preference is that PUC files the paperwork, but it's sort of a splitting of the difference there. So again, a lot of numbers in there. I think our preference will be that as soon as possible, it moves over to A&R, where it has the dam safety engineers, has the biologists, has the flow ecologists, and all the staff that can manage them.
That was a filing for which regulator regulates, that is initiated by the current regulator, not by the dam owner.
That's actually a good question.
Can be initiated by anyone.
Right.
It can be initiated by anyone.
So that's sort of was our thoughts on the transfer of jurisdiction. As to the liability language, I'm not the best person to talk about it. Others on the advocates helped write it, of course, Mr. O'Grady did as well. Certainly open to discussion. I mean, the point that Senator White said, where somebody needs to be held liable, whether it's the state, whether it's the owner, somebody needs to be responsible, with the understanding that FERC dams, hydro dams are already under much more regulation, much more scrutiny than the frog pond, which can also, maybe not to the scale of taking out Waterbury and everything downstream of Winooski, but the frog pond still could still take out the foundation of the house just below stream, and then the culvert to the road next to it or something along those lines. So the damage would not be near as extensive, but would be, let's say, much more likely, since there's in the neighborhood of 1,200 of these sort of unused broken dams lying around that somebody owns is being used for a frog pond or a skating rink or something along those lines. And the owner of the dam should be liable. That's whoever is getting the benefit of the dam should, as the owner, should also be responsible for the repair and the liability of it. All that being said, we're open to discussing tweaks to liability language and things of that nature, so we could. We understood that the liability language was going to be concerning to some people, and then we can talk about whether or not a dam that's under a FERC license has a different level of scrutiny as the dam does not. It's not generating hydropower or something along those lines. This is something we can all be correct with.
Thank you. Well, and one of the things that I found compelling in Mr. Johnson's testimony was, the thought that with a high degree of scrutiny, one could be doing everything right and still
Correct.
catastrophe can happen. And so I think there's some distinction to be made there in terms of like, what's, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know all the nuances of strict liability, but it seems to me that, there's a difference between, doing our best and letting a dam be derelict and,
Correct.
and in that case, you should have been taking care of it, or.
Right, and if the dam safety program comes and issues an order to this order of the Frog Pond Dam and says, you need to do X, Y, and Z, and the owner doesn't do X, Y, and Z, and something happens, that's.
Right.
And he is a bit more of a negligence than strict liability, where, okay, I've done everything I think of, the dam still
Right.
breaks, but somebody, what was being discussed was.
Right.
Somebody was harmed downstream, and maybe it's just a hazard, not the word I'm really looking for, but maybe just a hazard of being a dam owner all the way around, so there is going to be. But again, we're certainly open to discussing tweaking nuances and things like that, and I'm sure Mike has some ideas about this stuff, so.
I mean, not right now, but that's something.
So, can we help remind the committee of the consequence of the shift that's being contemplated for current law into the strict federal jointly viable language? I mean, does it eliminate, we had a very nuanced discussion at some length the other day, but it seemed like a fair amount of it hinged on whether or not negligence was involved or not.
I think that that's a core part of the issue, because I read to you that case from 1927 after the standard from that case after the failure of that dam after the Great Flood, and that was negligence. You would be liable for negligence unless the act of God was so significant that it would, your negligence wouldn't have contributed to that of the dam. So, but there is a general theory out there, which is in part recognized by A&R on their website, where it says when you buy a dam, remember I said, showed you, and it says in general on A&R's website, the theory for liability for dam failure is strict liability. And that's probably something they're getting from the Association of Dam Safety Officials that says if you don't address it, then there's general common law out there that says there's this case out in England called Rylance versus Fletcher, which is the first one that established strict liability, and it's been incorporated in some states. And so that is your debate. If there were a failure and you didn't have anything on statute as you were proposing, there, that would be the contest and the floor.
Just that.
Well, are you going to go with the 1927 decision, or are you gonna focus on something like Ryland versus Fletcher and strict liability? That's honestly, in my opinion, the current status.
Yeah.
That is where you would wind up in front of a court litigating what the standard is. And then whether or not that standard should be applied against any specific dam failure.
Thank you. Any other questions for council? I mean, we're gonna have to put some work still, we can hear in the finish line to sort this out. I do know that, we had trying to, I can't remember if Ted Brady on behalf of VLCT said it while he was in committee or in, I don't know, you know how it works around here, if you're having a hallway conversation, but there's expressing a concern that there would be municipalities that would have uninsurable things.
He was sitting in his chair when he mentioned that to the committee, yeah.
So that's a troublesome consequence to kind of. Okay, great, anything else on names?
Well, that's a discussion of you, Mr. Chair, do you wanna walk through the changes that we are proposing now, or, nothing else on liability or the jurisdictional transfer per se, but. We had some, there's Senator White's, the memo to Senator White regarding the auditor's suggestions.
Sure, we have till 11:15.
I just wasn't sure if you wanted to get into all of that now, or if you wanted us to come back and discuss
Sensing that
it.
all of that now is bigger than from here to 11:15.
That's more than 7 minutes, yes, sir.
So,
Put it in the bill then, just to start?
yeah,
Some of it actually has been incorporated into the phase 1 and phase 2 rulemaking. One of them is in the draft that we proposed, so it's a mixture.
Maybe everything that's not yet in the bill, we can put in the bill?
I think we would wanna walk through it before we start moving it in.
Okay, I'd love to understand the schedule.
Sure, well, we're trying to keep two bills moving as fast as possible, filling in each blank in our schedule to keep making progress. Yeah, if you want to. We can start the process. I just wanted, because there are people here just for the dance.
I guess we might as well keep going since there are damn folks, so to speak, and that including myself in the room. We can I can keep going with that part of the discussion as far as we get before you have to
Okay, so if you have made changes in the dance section, so we want to walk through those.
Sure, so. Proverbial seal paper here, so I'm looking at, I think you all have copies now, the proposed changes to draft 1.1, these are. Just all the way through, generally, these are a combination of proposed changes from the advocates, as well as we incorporated some of the proposals from the Agency of Natural Resources. It was sort of our decision which ones to go with ours and which ones to go with A&R, so that would be, I'm not gonna speak for A&R whether or not they approve, but I think some of them were great suggestions and some of them we preferred what we were suggesting. So Dan starts on page 16. In the first large chunk of it, page 18, there's a proposed definition for dam removal, about 3/4 way down the page. That ties back into not actually this section, but the wetlands section. So, and then the next, I want to say all the way through page 26 is the language from page 615. So that's our jurisdictional transfer. A lot of it is as you know, as legislative council can go through is sort of truing things up and putting in the words department instead of the agency having jurisdiction. So a lot of this, that is the big cleanup. Hey,
So sorry, the next highlights is here now.
yes,
Are there changes between that dam removal definition in 29 was highlighting things back up?
no highlighting in there. This is all, that's all language from 615. the local jurisdiction transfer, a lot of it. 26, a lot of technical, so page 29. Is then, this is one of the suggestions from the auditor's memo. They're providing inspection reports on dams being owned by the state and also posted on the department website. It's language is fairly self-explanatory, there's a fair number of reporting sections of this bill of reporting various conditions and things. Where it gets into sort of the back and forth was the dam safety revolving loan fund, which starts on page 30. If you recall, there is both. So it is currently an unsafe dam revolving loan fund. It doesn't change. It doesn't create a new fund by any means. It sort of changes the structure of the existing fund to go towards emergency and non-emergency uses for dam repairs. If you recall, the funding for this is being proposed in the governor's FY25 budget of $1 million. I believe off the top of my head, when Secretary Moore testified, she said the need for dam repairs was somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 to $70 million, I believe was the spread. So $1 million, you're not gonna get very far with this, but it's a start. So the language that's associated with the emergency funding, a lot of this is A&R language, in terms of just all these highlights. And striking out some of the language we had initially proposed is, mostly has to do with timing, the funding be available for emergencies and time sensitive critical situations, which makes perfect sense to us, it's an emergency. Where we have difference of opinion is whether or not when this money could be used for non-emergencies, or maybe the repairs need to be made, but it's not an imminent threat in danger. We have some language in the non-emergency funding section that has more criteria that would have to be met before the funding can be used for repairs under that circumstance. As we have maintained all the way out, the safest dam is the dam is no longer there. We want to push towards dam removal of small unused dams that can still cause damage downstream. That is the most economic thing to do. It is the most efficient thing to do. If the dam isn't being used, it doesn't have to be repaired and then maintained. It can only be repaired again at some point down the road. And there are safety benefits to removal. There are logical benefits to removal. So really, in looking at this fund, we see definitely the need for an emergency fund for repairs when there's an imminent threat, right facing downstream or non-emergency repair. We believe that funding should be much more scrutiny. This is mostly a loans. That's a policy decision. We prefer loans over grants. A revolving loan fund with $1 million, if the money is coming back in, we can move more to repairs, and if it's all granted out, then we'll have to come back to the General Assembly and get more funding out of the general fund. So that's something to weigh as well. There's conditions under which a loan or what is called a subsidized loan in here, which for all intents and purposes is a grant. So that's a decision as well. But we put in a number of criteria that we would prefer to see under the non-emergency funding, which is in page 31 running over into page 32. Actually, B, C, and D on page 32 are changes that A&R recommended, and E and F are ones that we are recommending, including the alternative analysis. If I'm remembering correctly, Ben Green, when he testified, was in favor of the alternative analysis. He was just not in favor of their program doing the alternative analysis, as that is just a lot of work for a program that's already stretched in. So in the rulemaking section, which is a little further along, we express that rules should be made for independent review of the alternative analysis and then outside engineering firms.
And is the thinking behind the alternative analysis, it may be for removal, right? And it may be that it's on the dam owner to get it because they're the ones who may be assessing whether or not they want to be on the hook for repairs and ongoing maintenance versus cost removal, sort of one and done.
So correct. So it would be one of those analysis that would offer. Here's when you keep it, when you remove it, all the different conditions, the benefits, the detriments, everything along that line. The owner would have a full picture as to how to proceed.
Is that just what is called out page 32 per F subsection F? I just wanna make sure I'm marking the right thing.
Yeah, so that's E, to be
What's
eligible,
the, okay.
alternate.
Oh, no,
allowance.
okay, thank you.
And then, the F is really more of conditions of what is being called conditions for loan subsidy agreement.
Got you, yeah. Thank you.
Very welcome. And then quickly, because we're already at the time, there is. The next change would be, on 36 is the rulemaking, which talks about, alternative analysis would have to be rulemaking. We added some language, we discussed this briefly with the committee on basin planning. It starts on 37, but that's a lot of current statute, really, the changes on page 39 in the middle, to L. To identify opportunities to mitigate impacts of severe precipitation events on communities. Through implementation of nature-based restoration projects, et cetera. So basically, we think in the basin planning should also look at resiliency projects that are available to be done every time a basin plan is done every 5 years. Resiliency should be included in that thinking. That could be probably written a little better, but that was
Okay.
for us.
But so section 11 is through L, well, through K.
Yes, correct.
That's current law, highlighted because it's new to the draft, but
Correct.
not new language, and then L is the suggested new language.
And finally, on, section 12, in the middle of page 39, the Senator Westman's bill that calls for 3 new positions. And then the effective dates and everything else is sort of down in section 13, going on to page 40. And it's various tiers, including the jurisdictional transfer that I talked about of 2025 and 2028. And on the back page, page 4, rulemaking and the revolving fund. The thought would be that the funding for emergency use for those loans would be available upon the effective date of July 1st, 2024. So the money would be basically available immediately. The non-emergency funding would not be available to locations. Okay. And I'll take it. But thank you for the facts.
Thank you, so let me just ask you, are you comfortable moving the dam safety language that we had into our next draft, or do you want more time to review, discuss it? Yes,
I am comfortable with pretty much all of it. I do think the part about strict liability needs to be,
Put an asterisk next to that, we'll be discussing, yes,
yeah.
understood.
Yeah.
right,
Okay.
okay,
So the language that Jared just proposed.
yes, please. Thank you. All right, so thank you everyone for marching right along. And we are gonna switch topics once again. And that is to take up Bill H599 and actually retroactively reinstate section 6081. Pause for a moment, yeah.
Before we leave, S215, I don't know if now's the right time to ask this, but I would love to see potential inclusion of a study to see about the possibility of expanding the current use programs to include what they.
If you can down here.
I,
So is there language we can look at?
we've been in touch about this possibility and we discussed what would be in it, but I've not the language yet.
Okay,
But if that is, I can be in touch with them to say, let's see the language
great.
for potential inclusion.
Yeah, so let's do
Yeah,
that,
okay.
like, the fun stuff that has the country we need to get to.
Yes.
We'll look at wetlands, we can look at
Study.
the study of UVA, and we'll keep on
Okay.
reviewing and adding and then. So we had, as folks may recall, there was the sort of the error in updating law that resulted in the loss of MVSA 60A1B as part of reviewing and amending the reports section. Looking through the annual GovOps bill that clears out reports no longer needed. So I think we had, my sense is we had discussion and council explained it and we were my sense was we were good to go, but I said, because we're correcting it, oops, let's just sleep on it and make sure that we look twice, before we move forward. And with that, the question for the committee that I'll ask some move is, reporting favorably each 599. So, Sarah Watson.
I move that we find favorably each 599. And recommend it to the Senate.
Any further committee discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Anyone opposed? So we have it 5-0.
5-0-0.
If anyone would like to report Senate Natural Resources and Navy for Bill here,
I feel like it ought to be one of us since we are also in the box.
right, I was thinking that if there is a natural fit, because the underlying story. Well,
I'm happy to.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
I will do.
Okay. She's gonna report.
Right. I mean, I think there's no like dwelling on it, but it can be that in that process and then boom, we're on, we're reinstating.
I mean, I'm happy to, but I think you would really. Oh, they.
She wins. You will.
Gosh.
Okay.
Joke, but.
Super Bowl like that last.
That's why-
Unless you would like to, yeah. Did you wanna do it?
No, I didn't fully understand what you
It's-
said.
I don't know that any of us really wants to, but there we are.
Who wants to copy being in the original bill? Okay. Great. So, well, we all voted for it. So that's the
Yes,
bottom.
and we'll back you
We
up.
all voted.
So just in terms of timing. Is it gonna be on the notice calendar today?
No, so you bring it up and then it'll be notice on Tuesday and then action on Wednesday.
Okay.
So a little time.
I have to grab what's called the clean copy and then you take the original and.
Okay.
Great.
Lost my pen.
So we have whatever, we have like 3-4 minutes, one, I wanna express my appreciation for everyone like. Pedaling the bicycle pretty fast and we've been on more than one bicycle this week, we're at 250, we're on municipal planning zoning, we're on floodplains, and then we're back again. Happily from my point of view, there are a fair amount of crossover points, like when we talk about the floodplain work, then it shows up in the tier 1, A, B, where would you not build? So hopefully if we're doing the map making exercises. Is get for me and maybe all of us more clarity on what goes on with maps, because we've talked about maps about every other hour. This session, and there are a lot of people making maps and it'd be one, I just like to understand that who's doing what and are we making the most of things we already have so we can not start from scratch on something. Like the basins planning, like, oh, well, they've been water quality only oriented, not resiliency oriented. Who could enhance those maps? And then they become available to the RPCs and others for part of the flood work, so that's. Anything else that people would like to, I might be driving the bus, but we're all on the same trip. So what we have, is there anything we haven't been talking about this week that you think, yeah, I'd like to bring that in and sort of have that conversation. So we, for instance, thanks for getting Michael to draft up the sort of the full overview of the auditor's report. You mentioned one piece of it.
And it sounded like, I thought we agreed to include all of those, so we're.
I didn't, on all the, well, he hasn't drafted language for all those, right?
Yeah, well, he did the memo, I thought that's what we agreed to do, just a moment ago.
Right, so, well, okay, thanks, that's why I wanted to pause. So the memo says, here are the things and here's what you could do. And I would like to, as a committee, before we say, go ahead and draft all that and bring it into the next draft. I think I'd like to do a walkthrough of the memo before he's drafting. For all those pieces there, you know what I mean? I don't
Yeah,
know,
I mean, I'm
I
fine.
don't know if we all agree to everything, I don't even, we haven't talked about what they all are, I'm not saying that it's a yes, no, but. I don't know that I don't know enough about it for me. So then let's plan to have Michael back to help walk through that memo. I don't know if we need to have anyone from the auditor's office, in. Have you thought about?
I would, yes, I think I noted a few times that it would be great to have someone from the auditor's office.
Yeah. So let's schedule Michael. Because he would be one doing the drafting and then someone from the auditor's office to explain why they put forward those recommendations. And probably we should have
But
someone,
we have many of them already included in the bill,
Yeah.
so it really would only be a few.
yeah,
And if folks want a copy of the auditor's report, it is very helpful, they go through section by section, or they create like a section chart of the different recommendations they have as well, so it's just, you can look at one page and get all the info.
you know. It's a long, not that long report, but it's at 60 pages. That chart you're referring to, could you,
I have
could
a
you
copy.
get that, and so that everyone maybe can start with that?
Yeah, I got it.
Inquiring minds want to know, they can go to the full report, but you would like find the summary sheet, and look, there's a 3-ring binder, right?
With this, I had it in here, I showed it to Senator McCormick actually the last time, it's table 8. I'm happy to,
I would love us to continue, it's not something we haven't discussed, but I'd love us to continue to discuss the idea that if. We take various areas out of Act 250 jurisdictions, give them to the towns. That the idea that. The board, the environmental, or whatever it comes. Would take that jurisdiction back under specific circumstances. We need to make it, I'm sure there are people who don't want to do that, want to anticipate their concerns and answer them.
Sure. No, it's not like a useful backstop, because we're talking about a critical function.
I'm also thinking in terms of process, it's a very issue that I've been unhappy with. This could make it work for me, or what would make it work for me might make it not work for the people who wanted it in the first one. So I'd like us to explore the detail, and then the other one is on the mapping, that we actually direct that mapping include areas identified as suitable for well, specifically for energy development. Because what we're asked to do in our afternoon committee was to remove the ability of concerned
yes.
citizens to raise set issues. And I'd like to maybe get ahead of that and have them not have those issues come up in the first place. And if they do come up, you say, well, we've already designated this area, so.
You're right, it could be that if you're trying to develop in the designated area, that it's extra, it's like it's a little like your master permit, right? Like we already reviewed and made some decisions about the appropriateness of this happening here, so. You can't get asked the same question all over again. Okay, so I'm writing down mapping with energy siting in particular, auditors report.
Yes.
Anything else that you're, UVA,
Yep, current use expansion,
Oh, yeah,
the study.
yeah.
okay, so.
And geothermal, but I don't know if it's in either of those two bills.
Well,
Mapping with energy siting, UVA, current use and auditors. Anything else on that sort of, we want to put in our in basket at the moment, but we can think of.
well, so in terms of putting in our in basket. I mean, I'm thinking about. The roadmap that we probably have for another couple of weeks.
In terms of how all these
In
goals
terms
work.
of how all of this works, because there's other priorities, there's other topics that I would love to get to.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about especially since we heard there are 3 committees working on activity right now, like. I just would like for us to make the most of it.
I agree. So, again, met with the pro tem on workflow within our side, within the Senate and between the two sides of the building. And by a week from today, the leadership is supposed to have that roadmap developed. They're in discussions now. So yeah, you know, I think, so what here's how I've been thinking about it, like, if we work on it in chunks, but part-time, and we'll get our other work done, like, the next thing out the door, I think probably at 2:13 out a week from today may be ambitious. But I think it's worth aiming for, and like, okay, so if we need an extra day or two, but I would still like to help us hold our own feet to the fire for Friday. And see how close we get, maybe we get there, maybe we don't, I mean, the fact that liability keeps sort of propping back up, that's a tricky one, you know.
But I'm willing to, that's a point, you know, that's what's holding things up, like, I think most of us understand the urgency of S 213 in relation to the other bills, so. I would prefer if we take things out that we feel are not, so that we can't deal with versus like spooling it out.
Yeah,
But I don't.
yeah, I agree, you know, sometimes you have sections that are like sandbags on a balloon, and say, oh, we're not loading yet. See you later, and that sandbag is off and off, and then you take off, so.
Okay, shall we turn?
We are adjourned, oh,
Thank you.
yeah, great, thank you everyone.
Great, you picked some great people for today, the more, yeah, like that.
Yeah.
That was.
Had a balloon
That
landing.